Imagine a universe where starships boldly go, where iconic characters face unimaginable challenges, and where the very fabric of space and time is constantly being tested. That's the world of Star Trek, a saga that began on television but truly soared with its cinematic adventures. But here's the harsh truth. Not all Star Trek movies reach warp speed. Some crash and burn, leaving fans and critics alike scratching their heads. Let's embark on a critical journey through all 14 Star Trek films, ranked by their Rotten Tomatoes scores, from the depths of disappointment to the heights of critical acclaim. Prepare for some surprising twists, controversial opinions, and maybe even a phaser blast or two. And this is the part most people miss. It's not just about the scores. It's about understanding why some movies resonate while others fade into the nebula. 14. Star Trek, Section 31, 22%. This Paramount Plus exclusive film promised a thrilling dive into the shadowy world of Section 31, featuring the formidable Philippa Georgiou, Michelle Yeoh, from Star Trek Discovery. After her escapades on the USS Discovery, Georgiou finds herself undercover in the 24th century. She agrees to participate in a clandestine raid on a space station beyond Federation jurisdiction, only to encounter a masked figure and a mirror universe superweapon. Leading a ragtag team, Georgiou races against time to stop this mysterious adversary and unravel the mystery of how such a dangerous element from her universe ended up in this reality. But here's where it gets controversial. The initial reactions to Star Trek Section 31 were scathing. Critics slammed it as a glorified TV movie, unworthy of being the franchise's first film in 9 years. While Yeoh's performance earned praise, the plot was deemed shallow and uninspired, with action sequences that failed to ignite any excitement. Upon release, Section 31 made an unfortunate mark, breaking a Rotten Tomatoes record as the lowest-rated film in the franchise at the time. Although its score has slightly improved since its initial release, many fans consider it a forgettable chapter in the Star Trek saga. Was the straight-to-streaming format to blame, or were there deeper issues with the story itself? 13. Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, 22%. Directed by none other than Captain Kirk himself, William Shatner, 1989's Star Trek V, The Final Frontier took a bold, albeit divisive, step into religious territory. The film introduces Spock's long-lost half-brother, Sybok, Lawrence Luckinbill, a Vulcan obsessed with finding God in the vastness of space. To achieve his goals, Sybok hijacks the Enterprise, using his telepathic abilities to free the crew from their inner demons and rally them to his cause. Their journey to the center of the universe, however, reveals a truth far more sinister than Sybok could have imagined. The making of The Final Frontier was reportedly a tumultuous affair that nearly crippled the franchise. Beyond the behind-the-scenes struggles, the fusion of Star Trek with overt theological themes proved to be a narrative misstep that the film never fully recovered from. Shatner offered a somewhat apologetic explanation for his directorial choices, citing the film's limited budget as a major obstacle in realizing the story's ambitious vision. Regardless of who bears the ultimate responsibility, The Final Frontier undeniably stalled the franchise's cinematic momentum, though thankfully it didn't completely derail it. Was Shatner's vision too ambitious for the available resources? Or was the very concept of a Star Trek movie about finding God fundamentally flawed? 12. Star Trek Nemesis, 37%. The final cinematic voyage of the Star Trek The Next Generation crew, 2002's Star Trek Nemesis, was a disappointing farewell. As the Enterprise crew faces an uncertain future, Captain Picard, Patrick Stewart, discovers that the Romulan Empire has secretly cloned him. This clone, a young man named Shinzon, Tom Hardy, seizes control of the Romulan government and invites Picard to a meeting under the guise of establishing peace with the Federation. However, this is a trap, Shinzon plans to use Picard's DNA to stabilize his deteriorating condition before launching an attack on Earth with a powerful Romulan superweapon. According to Jonathan Frakes, a veteran of Star Trek and director himself, Star Trek Nemesis suffered from an excessive focus on Shinzon and a difficult relationship with director Stuart Baird. But the film's problems run deeper. It often tries too hard to be edgy and action-packed, deviating from the franchise's core values. Despite his significant screen time, Shinzon is often regarded as one of the weakest villains in Star Trek history. Thankfully, the TNG crew received the satisfying conclusion they deserved in Star Trek Picard, as Nemesis did them a great disservice. Did Nemesis try too hard to be a blockbuster, sacrificing the character-driven storytelling that made TNG so beloved? 11. Star Trek Generations, 47%. Released in 1994, Star Trek Generations marked a transition for the franchise, bridging the gap between the next generation and the world of cinema. The film featured the return of Captain Kirk, William Shatner, who teams up with Picard in a time-bending adventure that ultimately leads to Kirk's heroic sacrifice. The time-displaced Kirk and Picard work together to stop the villainous Tolian Sorin from disrupting a cosmic nexus, a plot that would result in the deaths of millions. Meanwhile, the Enterprise is targeted by a pair of Klingon sisters who oppose the Federation's alliance with the Klingon Empire. While Star Trek Generations isn't necessarily a terrible movie, it's undeniably uneven and struggles to seamlessly integrate the TNG crew into the cinematic realm. The destruction of the Enterprise D and Kirk's death feel forced, as if they were included solely to amplify the story's scale. Despite the ambitious inter-franchise crossover, the film was only a modest box office success, and critical reception was mixed. The TNG crew would later achieve greater cinematic heights, but Generations fell short of its potential. Was the pressure of uniting two iconic crews too much for a single film to handle? Or did the plot itself simply lack the necessary spark? 10. Star Trek: The Motion Picture, 51%. A decade after their show's cancellation, the original Star Trek cast reunited for 1979's Star Trek: The Motion Picture. The plot involves the crew assembling on the Enterprise to confront a massive cosmic entity known as V'ger, which is obliterating everything in its path as it heads toward Earth. Admiral Kirk, initially unfamiliar with the modifications made to his old ship, takes command from its current captain, Willard Decker, Stephen Collins. Despite its box office success, Star Trek: The Motion Picture felt like a disappointment to many of the cast and crew. Production was reportedly plagued by behind-the-scenes problems, and while financially successful, the film received lukewarm reviews from audiences. In retrospect, the movie may be unfairly criticized for being perceived as dull, but its middling reputation has persisted for decades. The motion picture was an uncertain revival for the franchise, but it performed well enough to convince the studio to produce a sequel. Was the film's slow pace and philosophical themes too far removed from the action-oriented expectations of audiences at the time? Or was it simply a victim of its own ambition? Star Trek Insurrection, 55%. The last Star Trek movie directed by Jonathan Frakes, 1998's Star Trek Insurrection, marked the third cinematic outing for the TNG crew. Captain Picard learns that Data, Brent Spiner, has seemingly gone rogue while on a scientific observation mission on a planet of great significance to Starfleet. Investigating further, Picard and the crew discover that the planet's natural conditions possess healing and youth-restoring properties. Learning that Starfleet and their powerful new allies, the Sona, plan to forcibly relocate the planet's native population, the Enterprise crew takes a moral stand to thwart this scheme. The sequel to First Contact was initially conceived as a darker and more intense story than what was ultimately approved. The final product, felt more like an extended episode of The Next Generation than a grand cinematic adventure. The action sequences lack the necessary excitement, and the movie's attempts at humor fall flat. With their second-to-last film, the TNG crew began to lose momentum, a trend evident throughout Insurrection. Did the film's scaled-back scope and lighter tone betray the potential established by First Contact? Or was the underlying story simply uninspired? 8. Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, 78%. Although Spock's death in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan was intended to be permanent, Leonard Nimoy's renewed interest in the franchise led to his continued involvement. This extended beyond reprising his role as Spock to also directing 1984's Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. Picking up directly after The Wrath of Khan, the sequel follows Kirk and his friends as they attempt to reunite Spock's soul with his body to restore his peace. Located on the forbidden Genesis planet, Kirk discovers that Spock has been resurrected due to the planet's unique origins. However, the Klingons also make an appearance on the scene. While The Search for Spock may not feel as polished or grand as its predecessor, it remains a solid sequel. Nimoy proves his directing prowess, a skill he further refined throughout his time with the franchise. The movie also adopts a darker tone than many of the other films starring the original cast, with Kirk paying a heavy price to resurrect his best friend. Although it doesn't reach the heights of The Wrath of Khan, The Search for Spock is a competently made sequel. Was the film's somber tone and focus on character sacrifice a welcome departure from the franchise's usual optimism? Or did it lack the spark of adventure that defined its best installments? 7. Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, 81%. After the darker themes of The Search for Spock, the franchise shifted in a much more lighthearted direction with its 1986 sequel, Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. This tonal change was part of returning director Leonard Nimoy's 6 guiding principles in helming the movie, and proved to be a successful approach. While en route back to Earth, the Enterprise learns that the planet is being threatened by a mysterious probe emitting sounds similar to those of extinct whales. The Enterprise travels back in time to 1986 San Francisco to retrieve whales, bring them back to the 23rd century, and communicate with the probe. While the decision to have Leonard Nimoy as the movie's director reportedly created tension, it's not apparent in The Voyage Home itself. Instead, the movie represents Star Trek at its most comedic on the big screen, fully embracing its time-traveling premise. This sequel could have easily devolved into camp, but it skillfully revels in the fish-out-of-water charm of its characters. Genuinely funny while delivering an environmentally conscious message, The Voyage Home is an overall improvement over its predecessor. Did the film's lighter tone and focus on humor alienate longtime fans, or did it broaden the franchise's appeal to a wider audience? 6. Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, 83%. The swan song for the original Star Trek cast was 1991's Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, which centered on the possibility of peace between the Federation and the Klingon Empire. After suffering a devastating ecological disaster, the desperate Klingon Chancellor Gorkon, David Warner, proposes an armistice with the Federation. Spock volunteers the Enterprise to represent Starfleet during the ensuing peace talks, to the barely concealed displeasure of the crew. However, after Gorkon is assassinated, Kirk and McCoy, DeForest Kelley, are blamed for the murder. The crew must then work to clear their names and ensure that peace is achieved. The Undiscovered Country portrays the original crew in a different light, with their idealism giving way to a more conservative cynicism in their approach to the Klingons. Commentary on the end of the Cold War runs prominently throughout the 1991 film, even if the crew's initial reaction to it feels somewhat out of character. Returning director Nicholas Meyer brings a more grounded perspective to the franchise than he did in The Wrath of Khan, while still maintaining the sci-fi spectacle. An oddly subdued ending to the original series era, The Undiscovered Country is a significant improvement over Star Trek V, providing its ensemble with a satisfying narrative conclusion. Was the film's political allegory too heavy-handed? Or did it offer a timely and relevant commentary on real-world events? 5. Star Trek Into Darkness, 84%. After successfully rebooting the franchise, the Kelvin timeline introduced in 2009's Star Trek continued with its 2013 direct sequel, Star Trek Into Darkness. Shortly after Kirk, Chris Pine, is relieved of command for violating the Prime Directive, Starfleet Command is attacked by the enigmatic Khan Noonien Singh, Benedict Cumberbatch. Driven by a thirst for revenge, Kirk agrees to a dangerous mission that takes the Enterprise deep into Klingon territory, where Khan is hiding. However, after capturing Khan, Kirk discovers that certain figures within Starfleet have their own sinister agendas. A loosely adapted retelling of The Wrath of Khan, so much so that its director, Nicholas Meyer, was reportedly annoyed. Star Trek Into Darkness is a divisive entry. Critics appreciated the more morally ambiguous portrayal of Starfleet and the film's increased emphasis on explosive sci-fi action. In retrospect, even director J.J. Abrams has been candid about the movie's shortcomings, noting that the script needed further refinement. But despite its flaws, Star Trek Into Darkness offers an entertaining remix of Khan in the Kelvin timeline, as long as you don't overthink it. Was the film's reliance on nostalgia a strength or a weakness, and did it ultimately do justice to the legacy of The Wrath of Khan? 4. Star Trek Beyond, 86%. The Kelvin timeline trilogy concluded with 2016's Star Trek Beyond, opening with the destruction of the Enterprise. After crashing on the remote planet of Altamid, much of the surviving crew is taken prisoner by the villainous Krall. Idris Elba. The senior officers who avoided capture are scattered across the planet, trying to find a way to rescue the crew and defeat Krall. Regrouping at the wreckage of the USS Franklin, the makeshift team uncovers the truth about Krall and his plan to attack the Federation. Compared to its immediate predecessors, Star Trek Beyond featured a new writing team and a fresh director in Justin Lin, injecting the film series with a much-needed boost. The 2016 film blends the action-oriented sensibilities that began with the reboot with more familiar franchise elements to great effect. At the same time, the movie showcases the Kelvin timeline crew at their most existential, facing personal crossroads just before Krall's attack. A solid standalone adventure, Star Trek Beyond provides a satisfying experience for both new and returning Star Trek fans. Did the change in creative direction revitalize the franchise, or did it stray too far from the established formula? 3. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, 87%. Although Star Trek the Motion Picture had been commercially successful, it didn't reignite fan interest in the franchise as much as the studio had hoped. Fortunately, its 1982 sequel, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, completely course-corrected, resonating with fans and critics alike. After being marooned on a distant planet for years, the genetically enhanced Khan Noonien Singh, Ricardo Montalban, escapes and sets his sights on Kirk and the Enterprise crew. Distracted by his advancing age, Kirk is caught off guard and must outsmart his old enemy, but at a tremendous cost. The Wrath of Khan was made under immense pressure and nearly sabotaged by Gene Roddenberry, the franchise's creator, making its success even more remarkable. What The Wrath of Khan does so well is evoke a fan-favorite episode from the original series, making its adversary all the more personal to the returning characters. This classic callback is combined with a logical continuation of Kirk's story, culminating in one of the most emotional moments in the franchise. The Wrath of Khan demonstrated Star Trek's cinematic potential and set the standard for the franchise moving forward. Is The Wrath of Khan a perfect film, or does its reliance on nostalgia and melodrama hold it back from true greatness? 2. Star Trek First Contact, 93%. The Borg Collective were among the most compelling adversaries in Star Trek The Next Generation, making their transition to the big screen inevitable. This cinematic potential was realized in 1996's Star Trek First Contact, directed by Jonathan Frakes and written by Brannon Braga and Ronald D. Moore. During a full-scale assault on Earth, the Borg travel back to the 21st century to assimilate humanity at its weakest point. The Enterprise follows in hot pursuit, with Picard visibly consumed by the need to ensure that his most personal enemies are destroyed for good. Just as The Wrath of Khan revitalized the franchise after the financially successful but critically derided The Motion Picture, so too did First Contact reinvigorate the movie series after Generations. Already a formidable foe, the Borg were at their most terrifying in this 1996 film, with Alice Krige delivering a deliciously chilling performance as their leader, the Borg Queen. The main cast also gels together exceptionally well, portraying a group of familiar friends facing immense pressure that tests their bonds as the crisis intensifies. Patrick Stewart considers First Contact his favorite Star Trek movie, and for good reason, given its skillful blend of sci-fi action and emotional depth. Is First Contact the pinnacle of Star Trek filmmaking? Or does its darker tone and emphasis on action deviate too far from the franchise's core values? 1. Star Trek 2009, 94%. After the conclusion of Star Trek Enterprise in 2005, the franchise seemed to have lost its way. J.J. Abrams, fresh off the success of reviving the Mission Impossible franchise with Mission Impossible 3, turned his attention to another major Paramount property. Rather than simply rebooting the franchise, the creative team chose to create an alternate timeline populated by new interpretations of the classic characters. This involved Romulans traveling back in time and creating this divergent timeline, with Kirk, now a rebellious young man, finding his path to destiny as the commander of the Enterprise. What truly revitalized the franchise was the movie's outstanding cast, led by a supremely confident Chris Pine as the Kelvin Timeline Kirk. Each member of the ensemble brings a sense of familiarity to their characters, without feeling derivative. Abrams also infused the franchise with an unprecedented level of sci-fi spectacle, a sensibility that he amplified in the sequel. A rebirth for a classic property that had been struggling for years. The 2009 Star Trek injected new life into an old future. Did the film's reliance on action and visual effects overshadow its character development, or did it successfully modernize the franchise for a new generation of fans? So there you have it. A critical ranking of all 14 Star Trek movies based on their Rotten Tomatoes scores. But remember, these scores are just one perspective. What are your favorite and least favorite Star Trek films, and why? Do you agree with the critical consensus, or do you have your own unique ranking? Let us know in the comments below. Engage.